Let's talk about how you can free yourself by understanding the difference between the ego and your true self. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean. Welcome to my channel where I give you the knowledge you need to spiritually awaken and ascend with clarity and confidence. Have you ever felt like there are two versions of you? Have you ever felt like you're fighting with yourself inside of your head? Well, see, the reason it might feel like you sometimes are fighting with yourself is because there actually is the illusion of two versions of you. There is the true version of you, which is the real you that desires only to live and express from your heart. Then there is the false version of you, which is born of fear. This exists as an artificial personality structure that is designed to keep you shut down, repressed, and always questioning yourself. So that false version of yourself is what we call the ego. So the ego is your finite self, which is the false you that is designed to keep you functional in a finite world. Whereas the real you is infinite and is perfectly created by love to function as a creator in this universe. So the ongoing inner battle that we all face on this planet is a battle that is actually created by the ego itself. See, the true self never battles anything, but the ego creates the battle by always trying to repress what is true and real about you. See, you can look at it this way. Your inner light exists as a pure radiance of expression. But see, you are made to create and express in an infinite universe. So your inner light always seeks an unbridled expression of the most amazing creations and experiences that you could ever imagine. But here's the problem. This world is currently trapped in a finite state of being. And in a finite world, everything has a beginning and has an end. Everything exists as a separate identity from everything else. Therefore, whenever your true self seeks its natural outward radiant expression, it's going to be met with the resistance of the ego. See, the ego is premised on a lie that you are also a finite being who has a separate identity and has a beginning and an end. So that's where that inner conflict comes from. It comes from the natural expression of your true infinite self being met with the ego's finite identity trying to keep you small, keep you well-defined, and keep you encapsulated as a separate individual who is separate from everything else. So the thing is that we actually need the ego in order to be able to function in a finite world where everything is separate, everything does have a beginning and an end. We as an infinite being don't really have a way to function in that sort of an environment. Therefore, we have this kind of other weird identity called the ego, which is a match to the finite world, which also makes it seem like we too have a beginning and an end. We too are a separate identity. Basically, the job of the ego is to keep you functional in a finite world. Now, I want to mention one other thing that occurred to me as I was just contemplating all of this. I was thinking that this whole idea of going from 3D to 5D could actually be a trap designed to keep us in a finite, linear environment. See, because even though that sounds really good, it doesn't actually address what is really wrong here. It's designed to produce a feeling that we are moving forward when in truth, we're actually just kind of climbing a hierarchical ladder, but we're still inside of a perpetually finite state. I think that in a much bigger picture sense that it could actually serve as a bit of a distraction that's designed to keep our attention off of the real problem that is actually going on behind the scenes. See, as long as we are experiencing a finite reality at any level, we are still going to experience the conflict of duality. So the real bigger problem is that we are not meant to be finite, nor is this planet meant to be finite. We are infinite beings who are designed to live in an infinite planetary realm. Now, I know this might sound a little bit odd, but we can actually bypass these dimensional elevators and just focus on getting right to the heart of the matter itself. See, something has happened that has driven this planet into a finite state and repressed its true nature as an infinite realm of beauty and love. And the exact same thing has happened to us. As a matter of fact, it's happened throughout this entire universe. See, in our natural state, we do not have an ego. We don't need one. In our natural state, we are whole. We're not divided into two parts. The fact that we appear to have these two selves actually exists as a mirror image of the problem that ails this entire universe. And that problem is what we as Telstar refer to as the source of fear. The source of fear is the original lie that was initiated to produce a reverse flow type of physics that is the root cause of all suffering. So I'm going to suggest something interesting to you guys. I'm going to suggest that the elevator of moving from 3D to 5D and beyond is a linear path that is actually meant to keep us trapped inside the bigger problem. I mean, you can't really argue that it's linear because it clearly follows a linear numerical sequence. And this is exactly the kind of thing that the ego loves. It always wants to see something that is measurable in linear, finite terms. Because in a way, 3D is a certain type of identity, and 5D is a certain type of identity, and 6D is an identity, and so on. So these are actually markers in a finite universe. I mean, granted, they are different density levels, but they're still finite markers. I mean, if you think about it, how do you react to this idea of moving up through different densities? Don't you always kind of want to measure yourself to find out where you are in that spectrum? Well, of course you do, because otherwise, how do you know where you are? So you can certainly take that approach if you want to, but at some point, no matter how high you go, you are eventually going to bump up along the edges of a very finite universe. I mean, it won't look like this one does at a 3D level, but it will still be finite. And the thing is, you're still going to have all of those lower density levels in place. Therefore, what have you actually accomplished? What's been accomplished in the much bigger picture of the entire universe itself? Now, I sometimes get criticized because I'm not saying what everyone else is saying. I'm not saying the things that have been said on this planet for thousands of years. But here's the question. What is the end result of all of those things that have been said for thousands of years? Torture, pain, suffering, death, and division are still very much alive and well. Poverty and starvation are still the norm. And now things are even worse because now we have this AI takeover and the entire shutdown of all of planetary humanity. So where has all of that stuff that's been said for thousands of years, where has it all gotten us? Kind of nowhere. That's really the way I'm looking at it. See, it hasn't solved anything because none of it is addressing the real problem. I mean, we have our human problems, we have extraterrestrial problems, we have endless wars in space and constant conflict on our own planet. I mean, nothing truly meaningful has really changed. So why would we continue to rely on beliefs that have never been shown to actually work? See, I think it's time to start saying something different. I think we need to look elsewhere for answers instead of perpetually digging around in the same old tired philosophies. Ultimately, if you want to just look at the really big picture of this universe and the impact of the actual problem itself, the actual problem is that we are not meant to be finite. We are not meant to live in a mathematically designed universe. I know that sounds weird, but infinite is infinite. Infinite is not mathematical. And I know that all of our reference points are mathematical, so we find it very, very difficult to comprehend something that is beyond what we term mathematics. Let's come back to the subject of the ego itself. See, the truth is that we are not meant to have an ego at all. We're actually not meant to need one, but we do need one here. And that's how you can see that it is an indication of this much bigger problem. See, in our natural state, we are at one with the planet. All of life is at one with itself. There is no conflict and there is no death. And see, the other thing is you cannot have oneness without love. In a state of oneness, there is only love. But something has happened here that has divided everything up into separate identities. And these identities actually exist in conflict with each other. And see, I'm not just talking about the conflict between human beings and our emotions and our mental state and all of that. I'm actually talking about just the conflict between all of the separate objects. I mean, that's why you can drop a glass on a floor and it's going to break, or why anything that's physical can be damaged, because everything that exists in our physical world is in conflict with everything else. It exists in a state of separation from everything else. And that's why we need to have an ego in order to function here, because we need a version of ourselves that is also separate, that is also in conflict, so that we can actually fit in and integrate with this finite reality. But as a result, we human beings spend most of our lives, or maybe all of our lives, in a perpetual battle inside of ourselves. And that battle exists between the ego and who we really are. Here's the best way to look at it to make it easiest to see what it is I'm talking about. You can think of your true self as being pure light, pure love, incredible consciousness, and a very unique expression of omnipresent love, of that creative source of all that is, however you want to look at it. But that true self is in a perpetual state of radiant expression. That true self, that is who you really are, exists in a timeless state. It is an ongoing creative force. That's why we as human beings are creators. So we receive impulses from that greater source energy, that most powerful creator that we are an individual expression of. We receive ongoing impulses from that source of all life to create, to create, to create, to express, to expand in every way in an unlimited fashion. But when you put that true self in a finite world such as this, you're going to run into problems because, as I said, you can't really function in a finite world. So we have the finite ego. So what happens is you're in that constant state of inspiration, of expression, of heartfelt desire, of love, of oneness. And the ego is going to fight you on that every step of the way. It's going to repress you and resist that expression, because the ego's job is to keep you formatted in a way, on a physical level, in a way that you can integrate with all of the other separate identities. So in other words, the ego is a substitute identity, is a separate identity that is matches up with all of the other separate identities that are in conflict with each other on this planet. So then what you end up with is this very weird kind of mixed experience that can be really, really confusing. Now, sometimes the ego can serve a useful purpose when it is there to help you navigate through this finite reality and be able to integrate with it in sort of a balanced way. I guess we could call it that. So it's not that everything the ego does in this reality is all bad, but where it causes problems is when you really desire to express, when you really desire to move forward and expand and evolve, and the ego fights you on that. And generally, it's going to fight you with fear. It's going to fight you with anxiety. It's going to fight you with negativity and say, no, you can't, you can't. Let me mention one other thing. The ego has a voice. It's the voice in your head. You know, the voice that's always talking to you, the voice that keeps you awake at night when you really just want to relax and go to sleep, and it's talking to you about all the stuff you have to do. That's the voice of the ego. So the other thing that the ego wants to do is to interpret every single experience that you have in a way that matches its version of your reality. So we can get really confused with this bizarre kind of a mix. And a lot of times we think that voice in the head is us because we think the ego is who we really are. And unfortunately, when the ego has been most effective, it actually has succeeded in completely shutting down your true self entirely and having you manifest as a completely artificial personality that just beautifully integrates with a very fake kind of world. So there's a deeper need for freedom that we all feel. It's just this natural feeling, I just want to be free. I just want to be free to express and create and do and not have a feeling of fear and anxiety and obstacles and all the reasons why I can't. But see, the real freedom that we need is we need freedom from this finite existence. That's the evolutionary freedom that we need. We need the freedom to be whole again without the repressive nature of the ego. See, we have a deep need to free our light, our power, and to free who we really are in this universe. So if you understand this really simple construct of the difference between the real you, the infinite you, the true consciousness that you actually are, the difference between that and the ego and what the ego's job is and what it's actually trying to do to make it possible for you to exist in a finite world, when you understand that, then maybe you can begin to understand that your job is really to try and navigate between these two things. So for example, if there's something that you really want to do or you really want to express and the ego is saying, no, don't, that's not safe, or bad things might happen to you, or what if people don't like you, and all of those kinds of things, then what you can do is ask yourself a question. Say, okay, this seems like this is the ego giving me advice. And then you can ask yourself, is this really true? Or is this the ego just trying to keep me in my very small, finite place? And if you determine that it is the ego just doing its job, just trying to keep you small, trying to keep you contained, trying to keep you as a separate identity, if you ascertain that that's what you think is going on, then you can just make an effort to just go forward anyway, because the barrier that the ego will always put up in front of you to prevent you from expanding your consciousness, expanding yourself, expanding your reality, the barrier that it's always going to put up is that of fear. Fear is the barrier that the ego uses. It uses fear in many forms. It uses distractions. It might start to say, well, what about this person and that person? And it'll just get you all caught up in this whole big storyline of reasons why this, that, and the other thing. It just constantly talks to us, trying to interpret the world for us. That's what the ego wants to do. It wants to interpret the world for us, so we don't even get a chance sometimes to have our own direct experience of what is actually true and real. So the important thing to understand is that dealing with the ego is actually an evolutionary matter. Part of our evolution as human beings is to evolve through, past, and beyond the ego. It's a transmutational thing, but we can't really totally get past the ego without at the same time having this entire reality transformed as well, because we are at one with this planet. We are at one with whatever reality we find ourselves in. So the best thing to do right now is to just do your best to wake up to being able to recognize the difference between who you really are and your ego. Because the more that you see the difference, the more that you understand what is actually going on, what the function and the role of the ego is, the more easily you will be able to navigate through this reality in your life and have greater command over your decisions, your actions, and your consciousness overall. So the more that you are able to differentiate between yourself and the ego, the more easily you will be able to find peace. Because see, it's really just a simple matter of understanding. The ego is never going to give you any peace, because peace comes from the freedom of living from love, being love, and expressing that love in the world, in the universe. The ego is always going to try to block that. It's going to try to repress that. It's going to try to stop you. So when you see that you are not your ego, and you see that those are two very different things, and there's a dynamic that keeps playing out between those two forces, you won't be so identified with your ego, and you will start to feel more empowered. You'll start to have more peace, and you'll start to feel more in command of the situation you find yourself in being on this planet. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it out with anyone else who you think would find value in this information. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday with all new videos. And with that, I'm sending you so much love, light, and positive energy, and I so look forward to seeing you in the next video. Namaste.